The relationship between the oil industry and various governments runs deep in this country. Kevin Taft knows that better than many, as a former head of the Alberta Liberal Party and one-time leader of that province's official opposition. Now, out of the cut and thrust of daily politics, he's put his perspective into print. His new book is entitled Oil's Deep State: How the Petroleum Industry Undermines Democracy and Stops Action on Global Warming. And we're pleased that it brings Kevin Taft to our studio tonight. It's good to meet you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to Upper Canada, as we say to our friends from out west. This expression now, deep state, what do you mean it to mean in that context?
It's a term that has a long history, Steve, but it's been torqued a little bit since the Trump folks were elected. I try to take it back from them. Essentially what I argue is that in a democracy, there's a whole series of institutions we depend on. Our political parties, our civil service, our regulators, our courts, our universities, and so on. When a whole series of those institutions ends up captured by the same private interest rather than serving the public interest, if a whole series of them are captured and held by the same private interest, the nature of democracy itself gets changed. And in effect, we have a kind of a shell of democracy, but a core of a state within a state, which I'm calling the deep state.
I was interested in your use of the expression, of course, because under President Trump, it has come to mean something dark and conspiratorial, and I do or don't know if you mean it to mean that.
No, not in the same sense as Trump. I think there's a kind of paranoia to how the Trump people are using it, just as a kind of a shorthand for anybody who doesn't like what Donald Trump is doing. I actually wrote the book before Donald Trump was even elected, and I try to give the term deep state a little bit of intellectual rigor in the book. I've got I'm bringing my academic background to bear on that. I wanted a little bit of theory so that we could understand when we say, for example, when people say, well, of course the oil industry runs the government. What do we mean by that? How do they do that? Are they actually doing that? What would it look like? And if they are, how do the people of Alberta and Canada take it back?
Well, one of the expressions you hear all the time is that Alberta is a petro-state. Do you buy that?
I separate the two because in the true petro-states like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so on, there isn't the heritage of liberal democracy that we have in Alberta. In Alberta, there's a long, long tradition of democracy that predates oil, and we want it to be there. I certainly want it to be there after the oil industry's gone, which I think is going to be sooner than most people expect.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. But I do want to, liberal parties across this country are not all the same, obviously. The Liberal Party in British Columbia is a very conservative party. Liberal Party in Ontario is a very social democratic party, some would argue. And they focus mostly on health and education, those sort of left-leaning liberal parties, which I guess was your stock in trade for a long time.
Yes.
You are now writing about this relationship between oil and governments and climate change. And was there a conversion on the road to Damascus somewhere that took you in this direction?
Well, first of all, I should make it clear I'm no longer involved with any political party. So I'm not out here representing the Alberta Liberals or anybody else, just to be fair to everybody. I've always been very interested in environmental issues. It's 10 years now since I was leader of the opposition, nearly 10 years. And I guess my thinking has evolved and developed, but the current that flows into this book partly goes back to 1992 and the Rio Earth Summit, which some of your viewers will remember. Sure. A time when Canada was making commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, when the science on global warming was accepted worldwide. And then I asked myself, well, here we are 25 years later, emissions, especially from Alberta, but for Canada in general, are way up. There's this kind of ongoing debate, well, does the science stand up? How did that happen? What happened to our liberal democracies that they failed to act in the public interest?
Here's an excerpt from the book that I think goes some measure to answering the question you've just posed. In a healthy democracy, the few captured institutions are restored by the many institutions that remain autonomous. A central premise of this book is that when enough important institutions are captured and held long enough by the same private interest, the system becomes incapable of correcting itself. The captive institutions reinforce each other's captivity, and the capacity of democracy to function in the public interest is impaired. Democracy falls into the grip of a deep state. let's put some flesh on that bone. How,
Sure.
in your view, is the oil industry holding governments, institutions, etc., captive?
Well, first of all, they're an incredibly rich and well-resourced industry with a long history and a very strategic approach to political issues. I argue in the book with a whole lot of examples, including documents from court cases and deep background and so on, that the industry has set out over the past 25 years or so to gain what I consider undue influence over, for example, governing parties and opposition parties. So
through campaign contributions?
Through campaign contributions, through, for example, a whole number of energy ministers in Alberta have actually come from the oil industry. They then step into cabinet, they're responsible for the royalty systems, environmental standards, and so on, and then they return back to the industry.
Is it possible, though, that the mission in both cases is good, in as much as, okay, we get that business wants to make a buck, but politicians want to make sure that industry makes a buck so that there is revenue flowing into the Treasury to pay for health and education, to employ people, etc. Can they have the same mission?
We have to remember that the interests of the oil industry are not the same as the interests of the people of Alberta or the people of Canada. There is some overlap, but they are not the same. The oil industry, and indeed any other industry, operates from a completely different set of rules than the public interest concern of our democratic institutions, whether those are political parties, those are civil servants, those are regulators, those are the courts. They do not have the same interests. And the closer and closer they get merged, the more and more I become concerned about the health of democracy.
I want to ask you about a specific incident which you raise in the book. You don't say the person's name, but you basically said somebody came up to you from the industry and, well, you want to pick up the story?
Well, I remember the meeting well.
10 years ago or so.
Yes, it would have been about 10 years ago. And, I don't use people's names because these were private conversations. But this is a very senior person in the oil industry who's since moved on, who basically, after a series of meetings in which we were holding our ground on the position that royalties needed to rise in Alberta, basically said, if you don't get with our program, we have things that we can do that you won't even know what hit you. There will be no more Marquess of Queensberry rules. It's kind of all.
Well, he threatened to ruin you.
Yeah, in effect. And as things played out through what then became the 2008 election, and I watched what happened in our party, how, for example, political funding essentially ceased from the oil industry. But the same thing was also played out on the governing party, the PCs at that time, who were also calling under then Premier Ed Stelmach for royalty increases. Their funding was cut off from the industry. Within 2 years of winning the election, as Ed Stelmach did, he was out.
I'm interested in your view about how the NDP is doing now, because if there ever were going to be a party in the province of Alberta that might have a shot at standing up to the oil and gas industry, as you would want it to, it would be them. So let's read this from Oil's Deep State. The NDP were not just redefining themselves to others, they were redefining themselves to themselves. They were establishing rules of political discourse that frame both language and thought, and under these rules, it was now off limits for NDP members to think or speak about phasing out oil and gas. They were now wholly in the corner of the petroleum industry, fighting for oil sands production and working hard to outdo Jim Prentice, Stephen Harper, and their opponents in the Alberta legislature as pipeline and oil sands champions. What'd you make of that transformation?
It was dismaying. It was startling. I spent a term in the legislature with Rachel Notley, and she's very bright, very capable.
Now the Premier, of course.
Now the Premier of Alberta. To watch how rapidly her government fell in line with the industry. They've done some good things. I want to give credit where it's due. So I think the carbon tax, for example, is a step in the right direction. They've accelerated the plans to phase out coal-fired power plants. But how Rachel Notley has been traveling the country with an unequivocal championship for more pipelines coming out of the oil sands.
Why do you think?
I believe she stepped into a situation where everything around her top civil servants, her regulators, all the interest groups were already instruments of the oil industry. They were sitting down with her as she was elected and said, you know, Premier-elect Notley, here's the situation. I think she just chose to follow their lead.
You think she could not withstand that kind of external pressure? She's a pretty tough person.
She's tough, but she chose to fall in line with them. And so you see it play out even in the climate leadership plan that they unveiled. She's standing there on stage with a whole series of the most senior members of the oil industry right with her. The contrast, and I think it's very important to have a contrast so that we can see how things can be different, was the first term of Peter Lougheed as Premier, 1971 to 1975. Peter Lougheed, coming from a business background out of Calgary, tears up the royalty agreements in Alberta because the royalties are too low. He suspends export permits for natural gas because the prices coming back to the people of Alberta are too low. He walks out, and his team walk out of negotiating meetings, to the point where the Petroleum Club, one of the eminent exclusive clubs in Calgary, actually revokes Peter Lougheed's membership. Now that, you know, those were different times. He was a remarkable man, but I was looking for a little bit more of that backbone when the government changed, and
you don't see
tough.
it yet.
I don't see it yet. I guess there is always hope. Yeah, I mean they have done some good things, but it just they gave up before they started.
Well, it's interesting because the comparison is instructive here. I think the time you're referring to, that was Peter Lougheed's first term as Premier of Alberta.
That's right.
And of course, Ms. Notley is in her first term right now.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that he came in with the dire economic circumstances that she has come in with. And it may well be that if she wants to get reelected, and I assume she does, she understands that with oil and gas such a big part of the economy, she can't be an enemy to it.
No,
that's possible, isn't it?
It is possible, and I understand. You know, the Alberta economy is dominated by the oil and gas industry, and the political reality is you don't want to be enemies with the defining economic force in your province, but to be so cozy with them is the problem I have too. For example, on royalties, the royalty rates in Alberta are so low now that although the Alberta government is selling almost 3 million barrels of bitumen a day to big oil, the Alberta government actually earns more revenue from alcohol and gaming sales than from bitumen royalties. That's how low the royalties are. Those kinds of things should be addressed.
Is it possible, Kevin, that what one says when one is the leader of the opposition, I don't have to tell you, may not be the same thing one says when one becomes the premier of the province, when reality sets in and suddenly you're responsible for everything. Is it possible that whatever she said in opposition as the leader of the NDP, now that she's had a chance to be inside and be on the hook for making the decisions, she just doesn't see oil as being as evil as she thought it was back in the day?
You know, she may have gone through a deep personal transformation on that issue. I think that would be regrettable because I think there are profound issues, profound problems brought forward by the oil industry. I do not deny that Albertans and Canadians have prospered from selling fossil fuels, but this is an industry, you know, nearing the end of its dominance, and the unfunded environmental liabilities from this industry are immense. So, you know, I don't want to turn this into a picking on Rachel Notley sort of issue. I think this is a broader issue than that. It's an issue about democracy itself and how we as Canadians can keep an eye on our democratic institutions and make sure that they are actually serving the public interest and aren't just instruments of private business.
Sure. Well, one of the issues that has the potential, I guess, to go away is the issue of whether or not it is as environmentally damaging to our country and the rest of the world for the oil sands to be developed the way they are. And to that end, I want to play a clip from Chris Turner, a journalist, wrote a book also about the oil sands. He was here discussing whether zero emissions are possible in the near future. Let's roll that clip, Sheldon.
I think that's a far further off goal, and there's a lot of proof of concept needs to happen before we buy into that. But shrinking the footprint to a size where there's no really strong climate case to be made against bitumen versus any other barrel of oil, I think that's a reasonable midterm goal.
What do you think?
I think that change is going to come much more rapidly than most Albertans and most Canadians expect. It's interesting, Volkswagen, the largest automaker in the world, announced that over the next few years they were spending $51 billion Canadian on converting their fleet to electric vehicles. And they're saying within the next several years they will have a full line of electric vehicles. Well, the month before, General Motors made the same kind of commitment. Ford,
yes.
A whole range of those. So we could well be in a situation where within 5 years, electric vehicles are the dominant product on the car market.
If that's the case, doesn't this problem then solve itself?
Well, it does. But what we're not doing in Alberta and what we're not doing in Canada is preparing for that day. And so when we are actually looking at expanding oil sands production, we're hitching our economy to an industry that is in its declining days. And I'd much rather embrace the future than try to live in the past.
Let's come full circle here as we conclude our chat, and I want to ask you this. Is the intertwining between the interests of oil and gas and the various governments of this country so stuck together right now that you think it's impossible to pull it apart?
I don't think it'll be pulled apart in Alberta until the oil industry actually starts to fall apart. I think other parts of the country, it's not nearly as tight. So, I've been out on the West Coast in BC. There's a much stronger resistance to the oil industry there. We'll see how that Trans Mountain pipeline plays out. I think also in Ontario, there's a very strong concern. And so I think the last place to adapt will be Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan, the two major oil producers. But I do think change is coming and will come rapidly in the rest of the country.
I have one last very nerdy question to ask
Okay.
you. When I see a guy whose last name is Taft in politics, and I recall my American history where there was a president named Taft, a governor named Taft, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court named Taft. You part of that group?
Well, it's a pretty shirt-tail connection, but my stepfather's father was first cousin to President William Howard Taft. So there you go. Goes way back.
You're sort of descended from American presidential and legal royalty.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. That's a big stretch, Steve.
Well, because he was president and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
He was an interesting man.
The one and only. Kevin Taft, we're grateful that you could spend some time with us here at TVO tonight. Reminder, the name of the book is Oil's Deep State, How the Petroleum Industry Undermines Democracy and Stops Action on Global Warming. Nice to have you here.
Thanks very much, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.